Hello. So I'll be talking about the 10th precept tonight, and my name is Nishikai. I'm a monk here at the temple. Um, so the 10th precept is no abusing the three treasures. And we have a long form of all the precepts that we take here. So the long form is no asceticism, is no abusing the Buddha. No standpoint is no abusing the Dharma. And no self is no abusing the Sangha. And I think I'd like to start just by talking about the precepts in general, or how I understand what taking the precepts means. Um, at least in our community, we're encouraged to observe the precepts rather than obey them. So the idea is to study them, to make them important to your life, but not necessarily hold yourself to a particular standard about them, whether you're following it or you're getting it right, or you're doing really good or doing really bad. So no abusing the Dharma, the first jewel being the Buddha. So our long form goes into no asceticism. So I think that can show up in a lot of different ways. So I think it's about observing how we're too hard on ourselves, or by having taken this precept, then we're more likely to be aware of how we give ourselves a hard time, whether that's making our body hurt from sitting in a meditation posture too still for too long, or whether we're just scolding ourselves about a social interaction that didn't come out quite right, or kind of goes on and on how we torture ourselves. So that's one way to look at that first part of no abusing the Buddha. Another way that I'd like to go into is thinking of the Buddha as the teacher and how we abuse the teacher or take the teacher for granted. One way that that's been showing up a lot for me recently is how we project onto the teacher, how we think that he should be teaching us a certain way, or we think that his behavior is really anything. If we think something about the teacher, then in a sense we're abusing him if we're believing that. I think that the idea would be to receive the teacher, receive how we treat ourselves, receive what we outflow onto. So that's the crux of the practice anyways, to just receive. So this is just another touchstone to help us receive. No standpoint is no abusing the Dharma. Again, I think it's just another touchstone to see how we have to have a reference point about everything. We have to come up with some correct understanding around the teachings. Might be a way that this shows up kind of literally, that we think we understand something, or that in book study, for example, that someone's understanding is kind of missing the mark, or that they need to be corrected because they're not seeing what it's really pointing at, and on and on. I think that different people here would be able to describe that differently. And no self is no abusing the Sangha. And I guess I don't have much more to say other than how I related that to the teacher, that abusing the Sangha is just not recognizing them as another opportunity to receive, that we abuse them by going into our self-centeredness and believing any of our thoughts and preferring our own emotions or how we feel and what we prefer, rather than just being with our community. And that feels difficult because we're told to be around Sangha. We're told to kind of put some tension on that and spend time with each other, where in other circles we might be able to get away a little bit easier. Maybe another aspect that's showing up for me around just generally about no abusing the three treasures would just be that we don't see them as treasures. So it's just helpful to even read the word, the three treasures. What makes them valuable? Why is it put on a pedestal, so to speak, that these are things that we need to look at? And I guess I have my own ideas or what makes it valuable to me, but I think it's probably more valuable if everyone comes up with their own heart connection with them, rather than they're important because, or this is what they are. And I think that that's true of all the precepts. I think that they're very personal and that they develop in different ways for different people. I'll take questions at this point. You?
Yeah, Vine, what is abuse, Vine?
I think of it as harm, whether we know it or not. Abuse is a pretty strong word, but the contrast that's coming up for me out of no abusing the three treasures is how we opt for ourselves over any one of those three things, for our righteousness, or that we're just believing our mind stream. So that then in turn, by preferring our own thoughts and emotions, ends up harming people. It might not be direct or that we're physically harming them or even saying anything to them, but harming them, and that we could have potentially helped them by receiving them.
Vine, so is, if we substitute the word harm perhaps for abusing, could we say no harming the three treasures? Is that something we can choose to do or not do, Vine?
No, I don't think so. I think maybe relatively it could look like that you can adjust your life a little bit and get some success at not harming people, but more than likely that's just a self-centeredness that prefers to look like you're a helping person who's not harming anyone. I think that we don't have that much say so over what happens.
Thank you.
You don't?
You're not buying, is abuse a misuse of something?
I think you could say that. Do you have something further there?
You don't buy, I was just wondering if you maybe had an example of a way that we might abuse, say, abusing a Sangha.
Or shows up as just blaming them, thinking that they're causing our feelings, or that Yeah, just that it needs to show up a particular way, or that the community needs to be closer, that just any little comment about someone's neurosis, someone's, yeah, and just, you have anything further?
You Divine, I have another question, somewhat related. How do you treasure the Sangha in particular? How is it a treasure for you, Molly?
Don't know, I think for me, it's hard to put into words, or I think simply I just care about the people here, even if I haven't really interacted with them a whole lot. I think that maybe I just feel like this is my home here at the monastery and want them to, what it shows up for me is be left alone a little bit, or that feels like part of the culture here, is let them come to me on some level, and that's not always the case. I think sometimes I might go out of my way to talk to someone, but that feels like caring to me, to not try to make someone feel super welcome. And I think that's different for everyone. I'm thinking of Junshu now, where I feel like she's very good at making people feel welcome, where I just feel more awkward with social situations, so it's harder for me to engage people, I think. But I that's why it's a treasure too. I get to see how uncomfortable I am in social situations. So
Thank you.
Nyoka.
Milka bowing with abusing the Sangha, how does ignorance show up as an abuse? Bowing.
I'm not exactly sure how to answer. I guess the first thing that shows up is like deliberately ignoring someone isn't really helpful. But yeah, could you say more about the question?
Milka bowing, if we can't see what we're ignoring, how could that be abuse? Bowing.
Because likely we're ignoring a self-centered aspect that is still operating, and that's as far as I can get with that.
Milka bowing. So is that kind of ignorance that abuses Sangha? Is that like turning inward away from what we need to see? Bowing.
Again, I didn't really follow you, but an example that's coming up for me is pride, or you're ignorant, that you're being prideful, and it's kind of obvious to everyone else just how that hurts the room. It hurts the energy. The person is feeling sure of themselves, so they're not even really going to listen to what you have to say to them. So people won't even approach that person, or so many scenarios could be made up around that, but you're ignoring your own pride, and it has an effect. You know?
Long bowing. Does abuse require intention?
I feel like the English word, yes, and I would say yes, but I think with it being a precept and with it being a study and a practice, so the word was abuse, so we could switch it for harm to maybe loosen up the tightness of the word abuse, or maybe what shows up around that. that, but my understanding would be that the word would have intention.
Along bowing, if I'm selfish and because of that selfishness, I don't see how my behaviors are harming others, is that abusive? Or, I mean, I know you're just distinguishing between the two words, but I'm trying to get at that relationship between how someone else feels and where my intention is with that. Sorry if that's unclear.
Yeah, I don't think that you have a wrong intention just because you're abusing people because of your self-centeredness, but the word abuse just feels too strong for me, like in this context or this exchange. It's more like harming other people because, yeah, you're not outwardly intending to hurt someone else, but you are a confused person, and that's bound to bump into other people and really make their lives harder. Yeah,
It's just such a touchy situation for me. It seems hard to distinguish if that's my fault for being ignorant of the harm I'm causing, or if it's someone else's fault for, I don't know, being too sensitive.
I don't think it's anyone's fault, and I don't think that you need to stop being self-centered either, or be so careful to not hurt other people. But you're probably gonna have to do some of that. It's probably more painful to see the way that you do hurt people rather than, yeah, or I would try to avoid not doing any harm, or, yeah. So that's showing up now. Yoko.
Yoka bowing. You said a couple times, touchstone. How do you relate to that concept and in terms of, not just about this topic, but in terms of, yeah, what do you mean by that, Mom?
One way that it shows up is that we have so many ideas in Buddhism that it becomes pretty easy to become fixated on the concepts. But I like the word touchstone because you can look at the precepts and then let it go. It's kind of like Sokuzan's returning. There's no maintenance in it, that you go there and then let the whole thing fall apart. But that very process of touching in with it, then your intelligence can work with what shows up rather than just beat it with a hammer and figure out the best way to adhere to these precepts, or depending on what the situation is. But that's what I like about a touchstone or intention or observing, is that it's a slight instruction to move toward a more sane area. And then it doesn't give you much instruction from there, because it's the instruction that ends up confusing us and preferring ourselves in the first place.
Future bowing. Do the three treasures, are they inherently I don't know exactly how to phrase this. Do they warrant reception more than anything else? Is there something special about them that we should be endeavoring to receive more than something else?
I think as practitioners, yes, but fundamentally, no. There's not a difference between, we're just making this up. We're just, it's just a teaching. But I think that that all falls apart at some point, that there's really nothing more important than anything else. But while we're on the path and we're not seeing what this is, and we're inspired to be here, might as well look at the teachings and create that polarity of this is important and it is a pretty good thing to work with, especially the teacher and the Dharma. Sangha is a little bit harder to see how valuable that is, I think, but you wouldn't have a teacher unless you thought he was really helpful and really valuable, and you wouldn't be a Buddhist if you didn't think it was valuable too. Yeah, but the Sangha is a little bit harder to see, I think, for most people because it creates so much turmoil and
Shu bowing. If it feels like something that's happening in the Sangha is causing us harm or feels difficult, how can we or why should we give that a little bit more leeway?
can you say what you mean by leeway?
Uh, benefit of the doubt, I guess.
I think in that same way, you should give everything the benefit of the doubt, but you're around these people, you're reminded of practice, you're more likely to give the Sangha the benefit of the doubt. You've been told to give the Sangha the benefit of the doubt. And how I understand the benefit of the doubt or leeway would be to not believe your thoughts so quickly, or don't be so impulsive about it. Just to hold back a little bit. Get this, see if you can not know what their suffering is about and correct them so quickly, or whatever. It depends on what's showing up. We might have to sit with being uncomfortable with something in the Sangha for quite a bit of time and give yourself some leeway too to produce a bunch of crazy shit about it. But the idea is just to be aware of it. And okay.
Hogan bowing. Are the precepts more than an awareness practice?
I don't know what you mean by more. We could make up more. Yeah, or what do you saying?
Hogan bowing. It provisionally, it seems like the precepts were there to somehow calm the mind somewhat so that awareness practice could be more stable or grow more fruitfully. Do you see some connection between emphasizing morality and the strength of the mind to observe?
What was the last part you said? Is there like, yeah.
So Hogan bowing, does practicing morality, I'm going to say, improve our awareness practice?
I think it's just another teaching method. I think morality is just another way. If you have a teacher who's teaching morals to you, it's probably going to come down to that you can't quite reach that goal that your teacher set for you. And then you're going to have a conversation about it. And then the awareness will come through that interaction. So I think it's just a different way of teaching. I don't think it's wrong. I think that that's just not something that we particularly do here. It's a little bit, it's a Zen school. It's kind of less is better. It's more like sit and see it yourself rather than, and I think it's just different for the karma of the teacher. Some people are just built to follow rules and become a moral person, or feel like they can do that. But I think that this community is a bunch of fuck ups who can't quite get it together. So. All right.
Hogan bowing, does prioritizing your awareness of something instead of gritting your teeth and saying, I'm not gonna kill, I'm not going to steal, I'm gonna be celibate. Does one path, how do those paths differ? Bowing?
I don't, yeah, you'd probably be able to answer it better just because you've actually practiced, or from my understanding, that the Theravada tradition just does a little bit more of that, but I haven't practiced any morality other than kind of the cultural morality. And I feel like I can't do that, or I don't really see the helpfulness of it. If that's the actual goal. I mean, relatively, sure, it's better, it is helpful to be a kind person. But it just doesn't quite go far enough, maybe. I think that there's something leaking out if we're successful at that, but there's still some poison in that person. Yeah. Are there any questions online? You know,
Back. It's easy for me to imagine harming the Sangha, but it's harder to see how I could harm the Dharma or the teacher. Could you say how they show up for you?
you can harm the teacher the same as the Sangha, or he is the Sangha, Dharma's books, so it doesn't hurt. Or ideas. You can say it the same way, but can you ask the question again?
Bang. Working with this use of harm instead of abuse, it's hard for me to see how I could harm the Dharma or harm the teacher. And I mean, obviously I could kick Sokuzan, but I mean, Sokuzan bows at the seat when he's not in it. So it seems to me that there's something more to the teacher than just Mr. Brown here. So in that way, how can I harm the teacher? And how can I harm the Dharma?
For the Dharma, I thought of misleading people, thinking you know something about what the Dharma is, and misguiding people, just thinking you know. And what you're saying isn't all that helpful to that person. Harming the teacher. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that the harm is just is relative. He has a body, and then, but yeah, I don't think you can fundamentally hurt the teacher. I'm just thinking of dissuading other people, and yeah, I don't know what you're looking for exactly, but thank you.
The bowing, can you harm the station of the teacher?
Sure, relatively, we could try to oust Sokuzan. And to be more serious too, like through gossip or something, we could kind of erode the potency of the teacher to others. Don't think that you can actually do that if you're a student. I think that you're a student with your teacher, then it doesn't really matter. You're just going to do your best with that person to see what this is.
Can you, as a teacher, harm the station of the teacher?
I think so. I think especially for us practice teachers. But if you're talking about a true teacher, I don't think so. I think there's been a lot of outrageous teachers or Jogam Trungpa Rinpoche, and lots of teachers have been heavily judged for things that are culturally incorrect or abusive. And you could say that that is harming the station of the teacher. But I think that that's station of the teacher is just kind of a relative, like, how's it looking to everyone? But I don't think that fundamentally there's no one to knock down. You can't knock the teacher down. There's
I'm not talking about the teacher, like an individual teacher. I mean, like the position of of the teacher, like there's the president of the United States or a CEO of a company. Like if you're a president and you do something, you can harm the idea of the president, but not yourself. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think the spiritual path is a little bit different than that. It has that aspect of we can judge and evaluate how the teacher's looking and what the teacher looks like to the greater world or to the even to this community, and say that the teacher's actions is harming his station. It's giving it bad press by what he's doing. But I wouldn't be too concerned with that. I guess I would be more concerned with your relationship to the teacher than how it looks to others. Did I address your question, or?
Yes, thank you.
Doesn't Shushin have a question?
She's thinking, she's getting close.
Bowing. Can we abuse anything which is unreal? Bowing.
I mean, I see what you're getting at, but I think that that thing that's unreal still feels, I think that there's still a relative situation that we can't go off into our idea that it's all an illusion and then abuse it because it's not real. Unless I misunderstood. You have anything further?
Bowing. We hear a lot in the teachings that things are unreal, and yet when it comes to the experience, they feel pretty harmful. So I'm basically asking about the dynamic between one and the other.
Yeah, I don't think unreal means unfeeling, or I think my impression of it is that it's kind of more feeling to see that it's unreal. Just because you're able to receive it, it's a little more raw.
Bowing. How do we abuse ourselves? Bowing.
I think in so many ways, or thoughts, I think just by not seeing the truth or ignoring ignoring the world around us. I think just believing that we're a self, in a sense, abuses ourself for what we actually are. I think it's just a misunderstanding, and it's like the analogy that's used is we're like hitting our head on a wall over and over, and then it feels so much better when we stop. So I liken that to what we do when we think we're someone. We're always trying to improve, and we're all anxious about improving, and then we feel like shit when we're not improving. So it's like any direction we decide to go with the premise of being a self going somewhere always ends up hurting. So that in itself is abuse, although it's a bit of a strong word.
Bowing. Do we abuse ourselves when we abuse three treasures? Bowing.
I don't know. I don't I don't feel like I could talk about it that way, that others are myself, or I, I know I know what you're saying, or I see what you're saying, but I just can't quite get behind it.
Thank you.
If you see something happening to anyone, since we're all one, you see something happening and you ignore it, they're being hurt, and you just ignore it and walk away and not do anything, which is, I know you're not saying ignore, but not doing anything feels to me like ignoring. Does that make sense? So if you see something and you know you should do something and you just walk away, have you, I don't know how to finish the question.
I don't think you've necessarily done anything wrong. I think you might not be able to help that you didn't do anything, or perhaps you were actually insightful enough to realize that that wouldn't have been helpful, but you just felt like you should. You wanted to be the hero in the situation and go in and help because they were obviously suffering. Kind of thing happens all the time where, you know, we just want to be helpful, and quite often we're not really in a position to be helpful. A lot of the time, just we might not know the person well enough, or there's just not an opening to help. Yeah, so I don't think it's wrong if that's where you're going.
What if you can help? Or at least sit with them while they are in pain?
Maybe that we also might think that's helpful, and it might not be too.
Yeah.
So there's no like
if they ask you to and you do that and you sit there, that's.
I think that
Yeah.
could be helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
When you're bowing, I'm looking at the no abusing the Dharma, and it's longer form, no standpoint. If everything is preaching the Dharma, how can we approach, and I'll use the world as with no standpoint? What would be our view to have no standpoint as we see everything preaching Dharma?
sure what you mean, or what shows up is just your perception or just your reception of what's happening. That's your standpoint. Your standpoint is your experience. But it's not a standpoint intellectually. You're not going in. That's not your first weapon, so to speak, or tool.
When you're bowing, well, maybe that's the question. What is a standpoint? What is it to have a standpoint? Bowing?
I guess I just see it as an intellectual reference point, an idea, a concept about anything that informs our decisions about it. So it's okay if that's still arising, but it wouldn't necessarily inform the action. The action would be informed by your sense of sight and your thinking and your taste and all of it, all at the same time. So the thinking might be there and there might be a standpoint, but it's not in the driver's seat, so to speak. So I think that's no standpoint. You can still have standpoints, but it doesn't rule.
I'd like to ask the final question, since time is up. So down through the centuries, there have been many examples of teachers who have, in order to endeavor to help their students realize their true nature, have taken actions that appear to be very, very difficult, harmful, aggressive, mean. You could use the word abusive. And I'm putting you on the spot here. I'm not asking you to evaluate the teacher you're looking at right now. But I'm saying, is it possible for a teacher to fundamentally harm? We're talking about the spiritual path, not the relative path. But the spirit, is it possible for a teacher to fundamentally abuse or harm his or her students? No. Any further questions for this gentleman about his answer that he just gave? Don't hold back. He won't.
I have a question, but I need to think about it a second.
Go ahead, young lady. Please do it. Don't hold back. Help us all, please. Don't hold back. You can do it.
You distracted me so much, I can't even remember what I wanted to say.
That's called
Nice plan.
That's called distraction tactics.
Yep.
You're gonna leave?
Who that?
Be back.
One bigger.
Amazing. Amazing.
I think that there can be things, in fact, I know, I have experienced things in groups, in sanghas, where people have done things that have harmed other people and have harmed their spiritual track, because I know personally that there are people out there who are seriously reconsidering decisions that they've made to follow certain people and their teachings. So I disagree with you on that. But that's okay.
Yep, and I agree with you too, that I think you need to be very careful who you choose as a teacher, and
Sometimes it takes a long time to find out.
I know it's sad when people are mistreated from spiritual teachers. Thank you.
Now I'd like to say that, oh, please ask your question.
No question. I'm sorry for that.
No, please.
I have anger issues, I guess.
I'd like to say that I really appreciate you staying here. And Jamie, I appreciate your question. And when I say I knew it, that's why I'm asking that question, because I wanted you to speak up and say what you were feeling, what you were thinking, both of you. This is a Sangha, this is a community, not a place where you follow the leader or obey this old man. So I
But
appreciate.
I don't know if I can be part of this community.
Well, if you can't, then
Wait.
leave. You can, this is not a,
I want the community, not the behavior of the old man.
we're here, you can come to the community meeting tonight and discuss it somewhere if you like. But you cannot change. You cannot particularly change what is arising. You have to observe it. This is very, very difficult. I'm encouraging you to do that with your mind. Train your mind.
Oh, I have been.
Okay. There any final questions or for the teacher or for me, since I'm running my mouth? I'm not saying that some kind of right and wrong situation. Go ahead. Again,
It's a very relative question that you might not answer, but what would it mean for the teacher to succeed in the spiritual path?
The teacher needs to die. Die to this world, because this world is fighting with itself. It's making up shit and killing other people all over the place. Look at it everywhere. This is a place where we don't have to do this. We can look at the danger. We can look at the discrepancy. We can look at the suffering, not correct it. If you try to correct it, you're buying right into the same thing that created Gaza Strip. Don't do it. Be very generous with your attention. Give everything your attention. This teacher is dead. I'm still a body here, stumbling along, but there's no one here anymore. I don't have any proof for that other than I know I don't care what happens. This doesn't mean I intensely feel your suffering or Jamie's suffering or Zeb's or the person that's up here, Broken Arrows. I feel the suffering. I'm not the Bill Clinton. I feel your pain. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that pain doesn't belong to anyone. It's everyone's pain. It's not specific people suffering. It's everyone's suffering. That's what we need, a spiritual community, so we can come together like we're doing here, talk about the situation, not try to fix anybody. Nothing is broken. If you believe this illusion, you're deluded by it. And if you're deluded by it, you'll torture others, even with good intention. You're just doing the right thing. You're doing like the movie, do the right thing. There is no such thing. The teacher is dead, not physically, but dead to the polarities of the world that are supported by the illusion that there's a separate being who can win, lose, live or die, be right or wrong. Transcend this world. More? Did I answer your question? I responded to it, but didn't answer. Very important what you're asking. I'm not here to justify, validate, and I would say to Jamie and Zell, maybe this community doesn't work. Maybe the community that she was in or isn't now, maybe that's a better support for her particular spiritual path. This is not the right way to do this. This is a way. This is not, I'm not trying to convince anybody to stay here. If you all left tomorrow, which I don't think you will, but if you did, I would just stay home. I wouldn't go out and try to round up some more students. I don't round up students, if you haven't noticed. They come here. We might as well just have our community meeting right now. Where we're at.
I think we need to
We can have a circle. If you'd
rearrange
like
the
to have a
room.
circle, that would be fine.
We need to dedicate the merit to it.
We can do that. Yes, go ahead.
Mm. May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji Ho San Chi sa moko ja mi. The 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.